Hey everyone, in today's video I'll take you through the full process of creating an architectural visualization starting from blueprint import all the way to final AI enhanced render. We'll be working on a small cabin design and you'll learn how to import blueprints and model from scratch in Rhino, build out the environment, set up everything inside D5 render from materials to lighting and cameras, and finally enhance the render with AI for that polished look. Let's jump in. Alright, so first of all, we need to import the blueprints. For this, I'm going to just type in import on the command bar. If you want to follow along, you can download the same blueprints from my Patreon. Links in the description. And once we select the file, we're going to be having this window pop up. We will be leaving the model units as meters and the layout units as millimeters. It really doesn't matter. The only thing that matters right here are the model units. So let's just click on OK. And let's explore what we will be modeling right here. So this is a cabin that we have designed here on the studio. And it's actually going to be an Airbnb that we are going to be soon building. The access to it, it's over here where we have the steps. And if we go up here, we will have the kitchen, dining, and living room areas. And down here, we will have a bedroom 1, bedroom 2 with a shared bathroom. At the end of this hallway, as you can see, we have some stairs that will lead to the master bedroom and a small social area. And if we go through this door, we end up being on the balcony. Now, before we start modeling, we have to make sure that the scene will be nice and tidy, nice and clean. For this, we will be using layers. We can access layers by just clicking on this icon or typing in on the command bar layer. And because the blueprints were created on AutoCAD, we have all of these layers as you can see, but it will be much easier for us if we have all of them in one parent layer. So I'm going to right click and create new layer. Let's name it blueprints. Make it the current layer by clicking on this area. And what I'm going to do is just to select all with Ctrl+A and then deselect the parent layer, which will be blueprints, by pressing the Ctrl key. Now, I'll just click and drag them over here. And while we are here, it will be a good idea for us to just create the layers that we'll be using. In this case, I'll create an exterior wall layer. So we can call it ext_walls. Then we can create another layer, which will be the interior walls. So again, layers are going to be extremely helpful when we start applying materials too. So let's go. So we have windows, doors. We need another one that is going to be called openings. For the door and window openings, you'll see that we have a pretty efficient workflow in order to create them. Now, another one for the handrails. And the last one for the stairs. And let's begin with the exterior walls. Let's also lock the blueprint layer. This way, if I try to select them, we won't be able to, so we avoid any accidents from happening. And the good thing about this is that we can still snap to the walls that we have in here. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. I'll just close this window for now, and I'll be typing in polyline. So what we're going to be doing is to actually trace the exterior walls first. And before you begin, make sure that the OSnap tool is activated and that you have all of these options also turned on. And let's redraw them using a simple polyline. So I'll just start off from this point over here and make sure that you are only following the outline of the exterior walls. So things like steps or balconies, just leave them out for now, as we will be using a different layer for them. Alright, now let's go into the axis area. And at this point, we need to go to this side over here because this is not actually a wall, so just leave it out. And there we go. Now the thickness of these walls are 15 centimeters. Therefore, I'll just type in offset. For the value, I'm going to be using 0.15 because the units that I'm working with are on meters. And that's pretty much it. Now let's do the same thing for the second floor. So again, type in polyline. And we'll start off from this point. And don't mind the openings from the doors, as we'll take care of them in just a second in a more efficient way. So let me just redraw this area now. Make sure that you are actually closing the polyline, otherwise it's gonna be a little bit tricky to close the curve. So again, offset 0.15, and there we go. And you know what? We actually forgot about creating the layer for these slabs. So let's type in layer and right click, create new layer. And this is going to be ground slab. And let's just name the other one slab. Okay, now let's make the ground slab layer, the current one, by clicking on this area, and let's redraw it. And I have accidentally unlocked the blueprint layer. So let's lock it again. And we can actually use this outline as our ground slab. So let's just copy and paste it using Ctrl C, then Ctrl V. Now let's select it, and I'm going to right click this layer and select change object layer. And this is the way that we can change an object's layer. Now I'll make this other one the current layer. And this time I will be redrawing it with a polyline. And I'm going to start all the way up here and again redraw the outline. So basically we just need to select the vertices in order to trace this slab. Okay, so all the way over here, and all of this space, all of this area is gonna be our balcony. Now let's jump into the internal walls. So I'll make this one the current layer, and we can use a rectangle to redraw the internal walls so that we can be a little bit more efficient. Like so. And now I'll just need a polyline again, and don't forget that we are not going to be drawing the openings of the doors. So just ignore them for now. Also, we are not going to be worrying about the furniture just now because we will be using D5 render to complete the scene. Alright, great. Now let's grab this small wall here, like so, and we are almost done. This is where the closet is gonna be. And done. Now let's head over to the first floor, and I'll do the same thing. In this case, we only have this internal wall, so this is not gonna be taking us long at all. Okay, let's go down here now. And the last bit, like so. Alright, now let's jump into the handrails, and again, redraw them. So we have one here, which is the handrail for the stairs, and we have another one here that is actually the handrail for our balcony. Make sure that you have the smart track turned on so that when you grab this vertex, you can end up grabbing the perpendicular point right here. So now let's go over here, and there we go. And now let's just type in offset, and 0.15, I think it's a little bit too much of a thickness for a handrail, so let me just type in 0.1. We need to also close it, so again, let's just grab the polyline and close it down here on this side and on this other side. Now right click handrails and select objects because I want to join them. So I'll just type in join, and if I grab it, you'll see that now this is a closed curve. Now why am I closing it? Because I want to later on transform it into a surface or a solid object, right? Okay, great. For our next step, we are ready to create the opening. So let's again make it the current layer, and this time we are going to just use a simple rectangle. So let's start all the way up here. We have a window, so I'm just going to redraw it using a rectangle. And as you can see, I have actually missed this bit here, but we're going to be fixing it in just a second. Again, type in rectangle. Okay, so we have the access door here. We have another entrance over here. And now I'll head over to the bedrooms area so I can draw these doors. So let me just grab this one now. Okay, now the social bathroom one. Awesome. And the windows. Finally, these two doors. Awesome. Okay, great. Let me see if I missed one, and we have actually missed this one. Great, now let's jump into the second floor. Again, grab the rectangle tool. You can activate the last command by just hitting the spacebar key. And let's start with this door over here, and now the balcony door, and finally the window. Okay, let me make sure that this is actually okay, and it is. Now let's jump into the stairs. So we need to go back to the first floor for the stairs. Again, just create a rectangle for the first step, and because these have irregular shapes, we will be using again the polyline. So let's grab this point and close it like a triangle. Now this other one, it has an irregular shape. It's not basically a triangle, and it doesn't really matter if it's not really closing automatically. You can just close it as is and then hit the spacebar key. Now let's head over to this other triangle and again hit the spacebar key. Last but not least, we have these other triangles over here, or actually irregular shapes, and close it and now the last one. Now it's time to extrude everything, and I'm going to start off from the stairs because we're already doing them, right? So right click and select objects. Now isolate them, and in this case I will be going into a perspective view. Let me close this window here and grab this one. So the height of each step is going to be 0.18 meters. If you're working with feet or inches, you can just type in m, so 0.18 m, or if you're working with meters as I am, just leave it at 0.18. Now grab the step and type in copy, and I'm going to be grabbing this corner and copying it to this other one over here, like so. Now we actually need another rectangle here, okay? Extrude it by 0.18 again, grab it and copy it from this corner to this other one, and we can simply repeat the process like this. So one more step if I'm not mistaken. Now if you're not orbiting around the object that you want, just select the object and type in Z plus S, so zoom selected. Okay, now I'm going to be grabbing all of these polygons and extruding them by 0.18. Now instead of copying them, I'll be typing in move, and I'll be using the vertical option. So again, I'll grab this corner and snap it to the top one. Now this other one. So I'm no longer using the vertical option, that's optional. I'm just snapping them to these corners up here. Okay, now I no longer need these curves, so I'll type in Celsius V to select all of the curves, but make sure you are not selecting any of the walls or openings that we have traced, just these curves right here. Now delete them, and I'm going to grab the steps and group them. Now again, move, grab this corner and move it up here. And there we go, we have our stairs ready. Now let me just group them, but because I already grouped this one, I will first ungroup it and then group it again. And let's just grab all of our walls and extrude them. So again, typing layer, right click on exterior walls and select objects. And let's extrude the exterior walls from the ground floor first. So I'm going to be deselecting these with the Control key and extrude them with the gumball by 2.8 meters. Now let's jump into the internal walls. So right click, select objects. I'm going to be deselecting these because they will be having a slightly different height. Now extrude them by 2.8 again, and we can grab the ground slab. And I'll be extruding this downwards, so it's going to be negative 0.2. Awesome, so we have our walls ready. Now remember that we missed this bit right here, so make sure that you are on the interior walls layer. And with a simple rectangle, we can redraw this one, select it and extrude it upwards by 2.8. There we go, as good as new. Alright, now let's jump into the openings and select objects. And one thing before creating these openings is that we actually need to separate the window openings from the door ones. So let's go ahead and type in isolate, and I'll create a second openings layer that is going to be openings doors. And with the Control key, we'll be deselecting the windows, which are these four. And before changing its layer, let's make sure that we are not selecting these from the second floor. And now right click and change object layer. And actually, let's also rename this other one right here. So it's going to be openings windows. And in order to make sure that I shifted everything correctly, I'm going to right click and select objects. All right, great. And let's do the same thing for this other one over here. So select objects, and yep, these are all doors. Again, type in show. Let's start off with the windows. So right click, select objects, deselect these. And now, instead of using the extrude option from our gumball, I'll be using the cut option. So click once, and these will have a height of 2.8. Now let's jump into the openings doors, select objects, click on the cut tool, and instead of 2.8, these will have 2.1. And we have the openings ready for our first floor. Alright, so now it's time to extrude all the walls from our second floor. Right click exterior walls, select objects, make sure to deselect all of these, extrude them, in this case not by 2.8 but by 2.1. And the same thing for the internal walls. Great, now let's jump into the openings windows layer, select objects, deselect all of the rest, and cut it through 2.12. And the same thing for our doors. But in this case, it's not gonna be 2.1 but just 2 meters. This way we end up with this top thickness. And look at this, we actually forgot the bedroom door. So let's go back to a top view. I'm going to head over to the openings doors, and I'm just going to be using a simple rectangle to retrace this curve. Again, back to perspective, use the cut tool by 2 meters, and it's fixed. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab the top slab, so select objects, and extrude it down by negative 0.2 meters. But one thing to keep in mind is that we actually need to create an opening here for our stairs. And it's actually not going to be worth creating a new layer just for this opening. So we can just use this one and type in polyline to redraw the outline of our stairs like this. Okay, now let's grab the bottom slab and this curve. We can now isolate these two to see what we're doing and grab this curve and click and drag the cut tool like so. Now show everything again, and it's time to work on those handrails. So let me select them and isolate them. Now for the balcony handrails, we will be using a slightly different method, but first let's extrude this by 0.1. Now we can go ahead and duplicate this object by using the Alt key. So if I press and hold the Alt key while clicking on the Move tool from the gumball, I'll be able to duplicate this geometry. In this case, by 0.85. Alright, now I'm going to be drawing a polyline from this midpoint to this midpoint down here. And the tool that we're going to be using, it's called Array Curve, which will basically duplicate this line based on the path of a curve. So let me grab the bottom curve now, isolate both of these, and I'm going to be exploding this bottom curve so that we just end up with the outline, for which I'll be selecting all of these curves with a Shift key and then join it together. Now go ahead and offset this by 0.05 so that we end up having this curve at the middle. Now I'm going to move it and snap it to the bottom of this polyline. I can now delete these two curves because I no longer need it. And before duplicating this one, I'll type in pipe with a radius of 0.025. Okay, I'm ready to duplicate this object. So let me grab it, then type in array CRV. As you can see, now Rhino is asking me for the path curve, which is this one. And in here, instead of defining the number of items, we'll define the distance that these objects should have in between them. And we can use a distance of 0.5. Now just hit enter. And again, let's purge all of the curves. So cell CRV and delete them. Now type in show and we've got our handrail ready. As for the one that we have for our steps, this is going to be simple. We'll just extrude it by 0.85. Okay, and now what we're going to do is to grab all of the objects from our second floor and group them together. Now before we move our second floor on top of our first floor, we will be creating the windows and doors first. So let's make doors the current layer, and with a simple plane, we'll define the doors and windows. How can we do this? Well, we can just type in plane, then go ahead and grab the 3-point option. So I'm going to be grabbing this corner, now this one, and finally the bottom one. Okay, awesome. So we can actually just copy this plane. So type in copy and copy it to this other end over here. And then we can leave this one over here now. And in order to rotate it, I'll use rotate 3D, and make sure to always see what the command bar is asking you to do. In this case, it's telling me to define the rotation axis. So it's going to be from this end down here to this other one up here. Now the angle, so let's grab this point and rotate it over here. Obviously we need to close this. So with Ctrl plus Shift, we can select an individual edge. We can now type in move and shift this from this point to this other one right there. Now I can go ahead and type in copy again and copy this door and place it over here. And the same thing for this other one from the bathroom. Again, Ctrl plus Shift, type in move so that we can close this gap. Now we can grab the door and the same workflow. Type in copy, we can place the door right there and move it as we just did. And to be more efficient, I can just copy it to this other side now. Okay, and because I want the doors to be on the middle of our walls, I can grab all of these and I'll be clicking once on the x-axis, and I want to move them opposite to this direction. So it's going to be negative 0.075. And now these other ones over here, we don't need to move them on the opposite side. So it's going to be 0.075 on this direction. Now let's start with the windows. So plane, make sure to select the 3-point option. Let's go from this point to this point, and now down here. And the same thing with this one. And finally, this other window from our kitchen. And remember to move them so that they are not aligned to the outline of our walls. So let's move them on the x-axis by negative 0.075. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for our second floor. Let's go into doors, plane, 3-point, grab these 3 corners, copy, and then Ctrl+Shift, move, and align them to the wall. Now this other door, which leads to our balcony. So plane, 3-point, grab these 3 corners and move them negative 0.075. And the same thing with these ones. Alright, in here we just have this window, so that's good. Let's jump into Windows now and repeat the same workflow. Awesome, so we are almost done. Now let's grab all of these objects. I'm going to be grouping them together. Now let's grab our second floor. And what I want to do now is to make sure that all of the objects are on their respective layer. Okay, so select objects, exterior walls, nice. Everything seems to be okay. Right click interior walls now. And as you can see, our ground slab is part of this layer, which is not good. So let me just select it, go into ground slab, right click and change object layer. Now I'm going to be speeding this process. So again, I'll just make sure that all of the objects are on their correct layer. Okay, now what we need to do is to purge our file because I no longer need all of the curves that we used up to this point. So let me just type in CellCRV. And as you can see, I've selected also the blueprints and that is not something that we want. So let me go back to the exterior walls, lock the blueprints and again, CellCRV and delete them. Now I can go ahead and select all of our second floor, type in move, and I'll grab this point and match it with this other corner right there. And finally, we just need to create the roof. So let's create a new layer for it. Make it the current one. Now I'll create a polyline from this end to this end over here so that I can grab the midpoint and drag it up by using the shift key so that we align it to the z-axis as you can see, and it's gonna be having a height of 2.5 meters. Click once there. Now I'll just create a triangle like so, and I'll delete these 2 reference curves. To be a little bit more precise, I'll go to a lateral view, so the right view to be more specific, and I'm going to type in offset. So this offset is gonna be 0.11 so that we match it with the bottom walls. And I need to get rid of this curve right here. So I'll select everything, type in trim, and let me just delete it. Like this. Now, back to perspective view. And you guessed it right, we need to close this triangle. So type in polyline and close it like so. Now right click our roof layer, select objects, and type in join. Next, I'll be using the extrude curve command. And make sure up here that you have the solid set as yes. And we're going to be dragging this all the way over here. And there we go. So what we need to do now is to fill up this void right here. So let me grab the walls, the exterior walls, isolate them, and I'm going to be splitting them right here. For this, I'll be creating these 2 polylines, and I'll be extruding them down. Type in split, and use these 2 planes as the splitting objects. Now let me delete them, and we end up with these 3 individual surfaces. Next, I'll be grabbing the top surfaces with Ctrl+Shift, like so, bringing them up, then type in show again, and I've missed the window, so let me grab the edge from it, drag it up. Now I'll be selecting all of these geometries, typing in split again, and select the roof as our splitting object, like so. Now we can just delete them, and sometimes we'll end up with these pieces, which we need to also get rid of. So we end up with a very clean geometry. Okay, great. So the only thing left to do is to create the window frames. So let me right click here and create a new layer called window frames. For this, I'll be selecting only the windows, and we missed a window here for some reason. So let me go back to the windows layer. And again, by using a plane, the 3-point option, we can create it very fast. So again, let's select all of them. isolate them, and I'll be creating these window frames on a right view. So for now, let's just close this. And first of all, we need the outline of these window frames. So let me grab all of the surfaces, type in dot border, select the curves with Celsius V, isolate them, and use the offset command. So these will have 0.05 in thickness, so 5 centimeters, and we can do the same thing for all of them. We can actually also use a back view. So let me just change this view from front to back. Okay, so I can see this other window right here. So offset, and there we go. We can also drag this window all the way over here. Okay, great. And let's give some design to these window frames. So I'll just create a polyline over here and we can have this design. So I'll grab the midpoint here, then another point over here. And in order to avoid symmetry, I can start off from this point and then drag another window frame over here. In this case, I can grab the midpoint here. And again, to avoid the symmetry, I'll just pick this top area and close it like this. In the case of this window, I can do the same thing. So just a random design. Just try to avoid symmetry because it's a bit boring. Now I can offset each curve by 0.05 like so. And the same thing with this other one over here. Awesome. Now I'm going to select all of the curves and start trimming. So we end up with a very clean closed curve. All right, now the bottom one. So I'm just getting rid of all of the intersections, because later on, I can just go ahead and extrude it. And last but not least, this other one right here. Awesome. Celsius V to grab all of the curves and type in join. Now let's go over to our perspective view. And as you can see, unfortunately, they're not joined together because some of them are not on the same construction plane. In order to fix this, I'll just deselect this one because it's the only curve that is actually on the same construction plane. So let me just start off with this one and type in set PT. We need to align all of the control points from these curves on the x-axis. So I'll just get rid of Z and Y, click OK, and there we go. The same thing with this one over here. And now we can join them. Okay, let's start off with this one. If you end up with something like this, it means that the curve, it's not closed somewhere. And in this case, you can see that I've actually missed to trim this bottom area. So let me grab it, trim, then to be on the safe side, I'll type in join. We can now extrude it again, and you can see that we end up with a nice clean window frame. And we can do the same with these other two. So just extrude them by 5 centimeters. I'm going to be grouping these and type in show. Now let's check if everything looks all right, and it does. Let's go ahead and change this from a shaded view to an Arctic view. And again, we need to get rid of all of the curves that we used to create the window frames. And our modeling is almost done. The only thing left to do is to create this balcony and those steps. So let's go back to our top view, typing layer, right click, new layer, exterior, steps, make it the current one, and I'll redraw them using a polyline. Okay, so this is the first one, the second one, and finally the third one. Now another one for our balcony, so exterior balcony. And this is basically a slab with a handrail. Okay, great. Let's go back to our perspective view. I'll change this back to shaded mode. And I'll extrude these. Make sure we are on the exterior steps. So this is going to be 0.18. Now we can have this at 0.36. And we have an error here. And this is because our curve is not closed. So let's zoom select to it. I can actually isolate everything. Okay, that should fix it. There we go. And we should extrude this one by 0.54. Now let's head over to the balcony and remember that we need to change its layer. So right click, change object layer. Let's create a slab for it of, again, negative 0.2. Now we can pick this curve, move it up by 0.85, and I'll delete the back curve with Ctrl plus Shift. And then I'll just grab this curve, offset it by 0.1. I'll be closing it. So let me grab all of the curves. Whoops, this one went all the way to the bed. So let me close this properly. Okay, right click, select objects and join and extrude it by 0.05. As we did before, I can isolate this guy and I'm going to be deleting these two curves over here so that we end up with this one. Now offset this by 0.05. Okay, because I want to create the same type of balcony like the one that we have up here. So again, I'll be typing in polyline. Let's go ahead and grab these two curves, isolate them so that we can only concentrate on these two. And before typing array curve, I'll create this into a pipe with a radius of 0.02. Now array curve, select the path, and there we go. Just type in show. So I'm just going to be grabbing our balcony here. I'm gonna grab all of it, and it would be a good idea to group it. Now I'll type in move, and I'm going to match it with our bottom slab, which will be at around this point, I believe. Okay, let's see how this looks. All right, we actually need to bring it up a little bit, like so. If you want to be more precise, you can go ahead and type in move, pick the vertical option, and move it like so. In this case, I don't think we need these steps, so maybe just an outline. I'll create a polyline and follow the outline of these three steps. Now I'll grab it, and instead of using the command setpt, we can just pick this square on the z-axis and type in 0. Then we can move it by typing in move and match it with the start of our door. So extrude sphere V, make sure it's set as solid, and we can snap it to the ground floor, like so. Okay, we can actually delete these guys. And there we go. We have our cabin pretty much ready. Quick note, if you want to follow along with this exact project, I've uploaded everything to my Patreon. The full set of blueprints, the complete Rhino model, and the final D5 render scene ready to explore. It's a great way to support the channel and get access to more behind the scenes content and extra resources. Now let's keep going. So now that we're done with our 3D modeling of our architecture, we're going to be now designing some kind of environment. And this is important because even though D5 Render can handle landscape modeling, it's not that precise. So it's going to be a good idea for us to model it first here in Rhino. For this, I'm going to jump into the top view. So basically, we're just going to be using planes to model the terrain. Therefore, let's type in plane, and I'll draw one over here, another one over here, now at the top, and finally at this point over here. Make sure that the O snap is turned off so that you don't snap to the plans right now. And let's see what we've got on the perspective view. Alright, awesome. So we have something like this, and what I want to do is just to create some kind of slopes in between these planes that we have created. In order to do so, I'll just change the height of each one of these planes. So let me just take this one over here. Now let's go ahead and grab this plane, and we can scale it just by using the gumball on the y-axis. And now I want this one to go all the way to the back. So Ctrl+Shift and drag it all the way over here. And this guy, we can drag it at the back and also make it a little bit bigger. So something around this point. One thing to keep in mind though, that because I want to have some kind of slope, what I'm going to do is to pick this edge with Ctrl+Shift and lower it like this. So I'll maybe a little bit more. Let's lower it something around this area. And the same thing with this one, but on the opposite direction. Let's pick the plane now and drag it down. This should probably work. For our next step, what we need to do is to blend these surfaces together. And the command that allows us to do that is called blend SRF. So that's blend surface. Next, we have to pick the edges of these surfaces that we want to blend together. In this case, in this point and on this other point over here. So once we do that, this window will pop up. And what we need to do now is to just play around with these sliders until we get a more natural look to this slope. Alternatively, you can go ahead and pick the control points and move them like so. This is looking good, so I'll just click on OK. And we have to do the same thing, but with this other side. So again, blend surface. I'll pick this edge and this edge over here. Let me move this over to this side. And to avoid these type of results, you can actually go ahead and align the length of this surface with this top one over here. However, in my case, I'll just play around with these sliders and make sure you're looking this from this other side so that you can see some kind of slope. Okay, this will do. Next, we have to create a surface in between this one and all of the surfaces that we have created over here. So again, let's make sure that it has roughly the same length. And we can go ahead and type in blend surface again. But this time, I'll activate the chain edges option, which is up here. This will allow me to pick multiple edges like this. And then once we're done, I'll just press the spacebar key. And I'll select this other one and then hit the spacebar once again. At this point, we can go ahead and play around with the sliders, but I think this looks good enough. So I'll just click on OK, and we already have our terrain pretty much ready. However, I want it to be a little bit longer, so I'll grab these edges and drag them all the way back here. Now I'm going to define where our walkway is going to be. For this, it will be a good idea to go back to a top view, and let me just arrange this a bit better. Okay, now let's jump into top view, and we can also jump into layers again and turn off the blueprint layer. Create another layer by right clicking, then new layer, and this is going to be walkway. Let's make it the current layer and close this window. Now I'll just go into the standard tab, grab the control point and start this walkway all the way back here. I'll just turn off the ortho and O snapping options down here. And I want to have some kind of dynamic walkway, kind of like a zigzag, so it looks a bit more natural. We can go ahead and copy this, or you could select the curve and type in offset. Currently it's set as 3, but we can go all the way down to 2, for example. Let's drag it up a little bit, grab the control point curve once again, and I will probably have a different walkway going on this opposite direction. Grab it and offset it once again. And to define a walkway, which is going to be on the perimeter of our architecture, I can just draw a rectangle and cover it like this. Once I do that, I'll pick all of the curves, type in isolate, and trim it to define this walkway. So I'll get rid of all of these edges. And because walkways or roads usually have a fillet in between their intersections, I'll go ahead and just type in fillet. The radius right now is set as 2, so let's see if that works. That's a little bit too much, so I'll lower it to 1.5. Now I'll pick this curve, this other one, and the same thing for all of the other intersections. And we can do the same thing for the corners of our rectangle so that everything looks more natural. Great! I'm going to pick all of the curves and join them together. Right now it says that it's unable to join the curves because they are already joined apparently. So let me go back to a perspective view and I'll just type in show. And this time I'm going to pick the center surface and isolate it with my walkway. What I'll do now is pick the plane, type in split, and split it with my curves so that we end up with this nice defined walkway. I can now go ahead and delete the curves by typing in Ctrl+C and hitting the delete key. Now to add more detail to our modeling, I'll add some curves to these surfaces. So again, I'll create another layer which will be curves. Let's make it the current one, and I'll pick all of these and duplicate their border. So that's top border. Next, I'll type in offset to define the thickness of my curve. In this case, I'll just leave 0.2 for each one. And let's make sure that we are actually offsetting it towards our walkway, because what I want to do is to leave these other surfaces for our lawn area, where we're going to be applying the scatter tool from D5 render. Again, offset, make sure we're offsetting it on this direction. And now we can pick both of these and extrude it with the gumball by 0.2 upwards. That's probably a little bit too much. So let's go ahead and do that again. Let's do it by 0.15 meters. Again, with these ones and with these ones too. There we go. So we have our curves. Now let's type in show. Awesome. So we are basically done with our modeling. This is great, but before jumping into D5 render, we actually need to give each of our objects a material. And this is actually going to be pretty easy because we have everything neatly organized on our layers. But one thing that I want to mention before that is that all of these areas, especially these, will be just wild grass. while our slopes that we created, so these three, we're going to be placing some stones or rocks on them just to add more detail. So again, let's create a new layer which is going to be called wild grass, and another one for our rocks. So let's go ahead and pick these surfaces, right click, and probably I also want some wild grass on this surface too. So let's actually pick that one too. Right click and change object layer. Now as for these two left, I'll go ahead and place them on the rocks layer. And I almost forgot about our lawn, so I'll just pick these four, create a new layer, and call them lawn. Now right click and change object layer. Alright, now let's check if every object on our landscape design it's on its correct layer. First lawn, so select objects. Let's see, this is great. Now rocks, awesome. Wild grass, we got it. Curbs, great. Now walkway, what happened to walkway? Okay, we have to pick it, change object layer. Awesome. Okay, so we are good to go. Now how can we add materials to each one of these objects? We just need to type materials on the command bar. Now we can either press on this add material icon, or again right click and create new, and in this case we'll use the custom material one. Now let's just click here and pick custom, and we're going to be needing a few materials. So let's check our layer box, and in total we have around 20 different layers, so we have to create 20 different materials. And I'm just going to go ahead and speed this process up. Now I'm going to rename each of these materials so that they actually match the name of each layer. So again, I'll just speed this process up. Okay, and we're done. The only layer that I left out is the openings, because these are just curves and we're not going to be applying any material to them. However, what we want to have on this front facade is some wood. And this wood is actually going to be applied on these surfaces right here. So what I'm going to do is just to extract these surfaces. So you can go ahead and select them with Ctrl+Shift. Like so. So it's basically all of these surfaces. And I would also like some wood on this other side too. So I'll just pick this one and probably this one too. Okay, now that I've picked all of these surfaces, I'll extract them with the command extract srf. Next, I'll group them together and I'll create a special layer for them, which is going to be called wooden facade. Now right click and change its object layer. Finally, I will also add another material with this name, which is going to be called wooden facade. And if you're wondering why my material tab is out here, the only thing that I did was to pick it from our table here and click and drag it out. All right, I have these left over, so I'm going to just delete them. Now I'm going to just add a random color to each one of these materials. So let's start with external walls. I'll just click on the color bar here and add a light gray, for example. Now the internal walls, again, now a dark gray. And for the windows, I'll just go ahead and pick a cyan color or aquamarine. And for the doors, maybe I'll go with a brown color. And by the way, if you go all the way down here, you'll have all of the materials nicely organized. So I'll pick this brownish color for it, and so on and so forth. So any random color will do. Let's not worry about it that much. And you should end up with something like this. Now we just need to apply each material to the respective layer. For this, I'll just right click on here and click assign to layers. So this is external walls. And the only thing that we have to do is check the box and click on OK. Now I'll jump into internal walls. So right click, assign to layers, and look for the internal walls layer. Again, check it. And the same thing will go for all of these other materials. So again, let's just speed things up. And I just realized that we hit the layer of our balcony for some reason. So let's just turn it on again. And actually we need to bring our whole 3D model from our landscape design or exterior design down a little bit. So let me pick all of the objects. Then I'll type in move. Make sure you pick the vertical option and turn on the O snapping. So let's go ahead and lower this all the way down here, like so. Okay, awesome. Now let's keep on going. And we are done. Now a couple of things that need fixing. We probably need to just ungroup this balcony, grab both of these surfaces, and on layers, we'll just drag them to the ground slab layer. So right click and change object layer. And the same thing with this top slab. We might just need to change it to the external walls layer. So change object layer, and obviously our roof. So right click and change object layer. Finally, before jumping into D5 render, we need to map our objects so that the textures on D5 render don't look stretched once we apply them. In order to do so, we need to select all of the objects on our scene with the command cell all. Now I'll type in properties, head over to the texture mapping and change the type from surface to box. And that's everything we need. So we're ready to jump into the next section of this video. Alright, so now that we have everything ready, just make sure that you have downloaded D5 Render. If you haven't, just go ahead into d5render.com, then you would want to go into workflow and click on Rhino. In here, just make sure that you download the live sync for Rhino. Once you do that, just go back into Rhino and you will have this additional toolbar right in here. If you want, you can just click and drag it to place it up here somewhere. Then go ahead and click on connect to D5 Render. If it doesn't work, that means that you are connected to D5 Render already. So just right click on this button and left click it again. Once this window pops up, just click on new project. Now the first thing that we have to do is just to hide the terrain. For this, I'll go over here to the left bottom corner and click on this eye icon so that we just end up with our 3D model. So without further ado, let's apply materials to each one of our objects. You can either press the M key or you can go ahead and click on assets. I'll just press the M key. And let's start off with the main material for our 3D model, which is actually going to be wood. So let's head over to wood and I'll go all the way down here where I'll find this carbon black wood. So go ahead and download it and then click on this green icon and apply it to our roof. Now you can go ahead and pick any wooden material for our facade here. In my case, I'm going to try this cherry 03 wood. So I'll just apply it to see how it looks. And it's not looking bad at all. But we really need to change the direction of the UV mapping because these should be vertical. In order to do so, we are going to be heading into the Inspector tab on the right side and then go ahead and rotate it by 90 degrees inside the UV settings. And that's all to it. And I'm going to probably need to find something else for the wooden facade. So I'm going to just type in board and maybe we can try this sauna board. So select it and apply it. Okay, so I'm really not happy on the way this looks. So we might need to find something else on cgambient.com. So let's jump over there. So once in here, I'll click on PBR surfaces. Then I'll type in wood. Okay, and actually I'll just pick this one. And I'm going to download the 2K version as PNG. Once downloaded, go ahead and save it anywhere on your PC. Alright, right click and extract it. Now I'm going to go into view and show these as large icons. The ones that we don't need are these four, so let's go ahead and delete them. And D5 Render works with normal DX, so delete normal GL for the bump map. So as you can see, we have the color map, the displacement map, the normal map, which is for the relief, and finally the roughness map, which is for reflections. And in order to import them to D5 Render, the only thing that we have to do is to pick this wooden facade or wooden object. And all the way up here, we'll see this option called Patch Import PBR Textures. So just click on it, go inside the files where you downloaded this PBR texture and select all four and click on open. Now we need to rotate it again, so let's do that. I would also want this wood to be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to lower this stretch value a little bit so that we can see these boards better. Okay, we can leave it like that. It looks great already. Now hit the M key and let's apply some materials for our slab. These will be concrete and make sure that you're going to be clearing the search bar by pressing on this X icon. I'm going to go for this rough concrete 06. So let's download it. Now pick it and apply it to this slab. Okay, as for our curbs, I probably want to add a more darker concrete. So maybe something like the rough concrete 03 should do. So pick it again and apply it. And while we are at it, I'm going to look for a material for our walkway. For this, I will probably want to go into outdoor ground and look for some floor tiles here. I want something that could probably be in nature, so let's look for something like that. Alright, so maybe this grass growing tile 15. This probably should do. So let's actually pick it and apply it. Alright, so let's head over now to natural raw materials. And because we're going to be using this scatter tool for this lawn area, I will probably just go ahead and pick something from the dirt category. Something like this, dry deciduous grassland, and apply it again. And because I've been applying the materials for our landscape area, I'll just continue here. So now, instead of dirt, I would want to go into rock, and I'll try this accumulated rocks in here, just to apply them on our outline area. And again, I could probably use the same one for our wild grass area too. Now let's go back into our architecture and let's see what other material could we use for our balcony here. We would probably need to use a black metal. Let's go into metals. So I'm going to be using this one for the bottom one and probably also for this top one over here. It looks good like this. Alright, so now what could we use for our doors? Maybe a white paint. And if you wanted to add a little bit more of detail to our doors here, remember that we're using the D5 Live Sync. So whatever changes we apply to our door, it will be automatically updated here. But I'm not going to be worrying about that just now. So let's find something like a plaster, for which I'll just type it in here. So plaster, and there we go. This white plaster should do. So I'll just pick it and apply it to our doors. Now it doesn't look that good at all. So maybe let's go ahead into plastic, and I'll just use this ordinary plastic for now. And as for our windows, we obviously need a glass material for them. Let's try this blue curtain wall glass. Alright, maybe it's a little bit too bluish, and we can actually change its color by jumping into this option here and just reduce that bluish tint on it. So let's desaturate it a little bit. Alright, this looks great. For the window frames, we probably want to use another type of black metal. I'll just pick this black iron for them. So right in here. So before we continue, I'm not entirely happy with the doors, so I'm going to just select them and go into the base color and make them a little bit darker. Something around this area. That looks way better now. Okay, so now let's give some life to our lawn. For this, I'll jump into the Add Scatter tool. Then I'm going to click on lawn. And the one that I'll be using for now, it's gonna be this Natural Meadow 10. So you can pick it. And as you can see, if I just place my cursor on top of my lawn objects, it's gonna be highlighted. So I'll click once and then I'll click on create. And that's pretty much everything to it. We can leave it like that. As for our wild grass, I can actually pick this Natural Meadow 7. So I'll go and pick it and again apply it now to our wild grass area. Okay, so it's not looking bad at all, and I wouldn't worry about it too much, as those are going to just be covered with trees soon. Let's now add some rocks to this terrain, so we can go into the model tab now. Now let's go into nature, and inside nature all the way down here we'll have this stone category. Go ahead and pick the natural rock. And now before selecting the type of rock that you want to place in this area, I've got to mention that I'm going to be using this brush tool down here. Now the brush tool will be allowing us to just distribute really quickly any type of 3D model that we select. So for now, I'm going to pick this rock 13 and rock 15. And if I click once in here, you'll see that I'm going to be able to just place some rocks really quick like this. In order to delete them, you just have to pick the eraser tool, which is also accessed through the Alt key. So if I just press and hold the Alt key, I can delete them really quick. One thing to keep in mind is that we have to align these to the terrain. So make sure to check this option. And apparently, this surface is not on the correct side. That's why our rocks are being placed down here. In order to fix that, we have to go back to Rhino. So let me minimize this and I'll pick both of these surfaces and type in flip. Now let's open D5 Render again. Now I'm going to be erasing these. So I'll just pick these ones, go into assets and delete them with our eraser tool. I'm going to now pick the brush tool and you can see that we've managed to fix that. At this moment, these rocks are too big, so we must reduce the size of them. And we can do so by using this slider right here. Alright, maybe something like this looks good. Also, don't forget to use the random size and maybe also lower the density a little bit. I'll just press the Alt key now. And actually, I'm going to just uncheck these and I will use the Rock 1 and Rock 14 assets. Alright, I'll pick both of these now and start distribute them like this. Alright, they don't look really that good, so I'll just go ahead and uncheck them. We can also try this Rock 8 version. Whoops, and because I pressed the Ctrl+Z key, unfortunately, I undid the scattering tool on my wild grass area. So let me go ahead and select another one. I'm going to go for this Natural Meadow 2 now, just to see how it looks. And it looks pretty much the same. It's alright, we can leave it like that. So back into model, now the brush tool. I'll head over into nature and stone and natural rocks. Let's select Rock 8 and I'm going to increase its size and see how it looks again. Alright, this looks much better. And maybe we can go ahead and reduce the size. Alright, this looks really great. So I'm going to go ahead and paint all of this area now. You can also increase the density just to fill in all of the gaps. Alright, now over to this side. Okay, now let's head over to this other side and give it even more detail here. I'm going to increase the size a little bit again and the random size too. Alright, also we can add some extra rocks down here just to give it a little bit more of detail. Alright, and something around this area too. For our next step, what we are going to be doing is to add some trees. So let's go into the All Models section. And now I'm going to type in pine tree because I want some pretty tall trees for this. And why? Because the actual site where this project is going to be will have some pretty tall trees. So let me go ahead and just pick this one over here. And I don't want to use the brush tool for this. So go ahead and click it again. Now you can click on this positive icon and start placing the trees like this manually if you want. Or you can go ahead and use the path tool. And in this case, I am going to use the path tool just to populate my scene quickly. So as you can see, instead of the brush tool down here, we also have this option called the path tool. In the path tool, you can select multiple trees. So I'll just select this one, and probably this one to have some variation. So 4 different kind of trees. And now I'll just create this path over to this side and all the way to this side. So what I want to do is just to add a background of trees. So I'll just lower them, and in order to randomize them a little bit, I'm going to go all the way down here and increase the random size parameter value. You can also make them smaller or bigger, and you can also increase the random offset. Another thing that I want to do is to increase the number of them. So let's go all the way to 20. And now if I pick the path again and go up here, we will see that we have the edit option. So if I click on the edit option, I can now pick this point again and start creating a longer path, just like this. Alright, so alternatively, you can pick it again, go into edit, and instead of just clicking around, we can click and hold and change the position of our path. You can also go ahead and press the delete key to start deleting these paths. Alright, so I'll just lower this a little bit and drag it over to this side. Now, with the shift key, you can duplicate these paths. So you just need to press and hold the shift key like so. And I'll just bring these over here. And I can do the same all the way over here and increase their height. Now I'm going to start placing them strategically around my 3D model so that we can end up having more depth to our scene. So I'm going to pick the assets again. And let's start off with this one. So I'm going to place this one over here. Another one over to this side. Something a little bit closer to our house maybe. And make sure to pick another type of tree so that we randomize everything. So before I continue, I want to set up my camera in order to see where exactly I'm going to be placing these 3D models. So to set up our camera, we need to go into this camera icon right here. On the mode, just leave it as image, as panorama will be for 360 view. On the aspect ratio, we can pick 16:9, and the preset size, we can leave it at 4K. It's more than enough. And I usually use 24 for the focal length. It looks very nice, but you can go ahead and increase it if you want, or decrease it. Just don't go lower than 17, because lower than 17 we start to see some weird results. So just keep it at around maybe 24, 25, even 30. But again, I usually just use 24 for this. Now we also need to change the perspective of our camera. So if I go to these options up here and into view, we can change our camera to 2-point perspective. Alternatively, you can press the F8 key. Now I'll just place the camera correctly, so something around this area. Additionally, if you want some help placing your camera, you can again go into the menu, into view, and all the way down here you'll find this grid option. So the grid option will work as a rule of thirds. And we basically need to place our architecture on this center rectangle. You would also want to leave these 2 rows of rectangles basically for the sky, while the bottom ones will be left for our ground. Alright, I think this camera view looks nice, and in order to save it, we are going to be clicking on this Add Scene. And at this point, you can also go ahead and move the sunlight. So just pick it over here and move it around. Now, one thing that we have to do is to actually project some shadows on our facade. So for example, if I go ahead and leave it like this, we won't have any depth to our scene. And actually something around this point already looks fine. So if we want to update our scene with this lighting, I would just go ahead and click on Update Scene right here. Alternatively, we can use some HDRIs that in many cases are better than just having the Geosky turned on. You can go ahead into the HDRI tab over here and then click on this arrow and pick maybe a midday option, for example. But what I found out is that if we go over here into Studio and into Presets, we are also going to be having some ready-to-use HDRIs. You just have to press on D5 Curate it, and let's go all the way down here where we'll find this exterior overcast. This one is my favorite, so I'll just double click on it and we have to wait for a bit. Great, and there it is. This actually looks pretty good. As you can see, our assets look real, and don't worry, we'll keep populating the scene because we're not done yet. But it's nice to just have the settings ready for our lighting. And at this point, you might notice that the reflections of our windows look too empty. So let's fix that. But before that, I'm going to create a new view to save these settings. Okay, so now let's move out, and you'll notice that something weird is going on with our camera. And that is because we have a 2-point perspective turned on. We can just press the P key in order to return to the perspective mode. To go into assets, again, we have to deactivate the camera view by clicking on this camera icon again. Now jump into assets, and on the model section, we have the backdrop plane. I'll use this outdoor mountain one, so click it and just place it right here. I'm going to be closing this, and we can rotate it like so, or duplicate it by using the Shift key. So let's cover our entire area like this. Now we can go back to scene 2, for example, and we can see that our backdrop plane, it's a bit too high. So let's go back out, make sure to press the P key. And if we wanted to see how our scene is looking while shifting our 3D models around, we can click on the Edit Camera right here. Now press on this icon so that whenever we click, the camera will still be there. So let me lower our backdrop a little bit. Okay, so something around this area, you can see that now our reflections are looking all right. I can do the same thing with this one, so lower it down and then go back to scene 2. Okay, great. Now let's keep on placing some assets. Let me press the P key, and I'm going to start duplicating some of the trees that I have here. So what I want is to produce a little bit more of shadow on our foreground area, again, to give it a little bit more of depth to our scene. So I'll place one over here, and I would probably need to add some extra assets to the outline of our lawn. And the best way to go around this is by using the Path tool. So I'm going to go back into Assets, Model, Nature, and I'll jump into Flower and Shrub. Now I will pick the Path tool again, and select some shrubs, probably these three. Now I'm going to follow the outline of our curbs. Okay, great. And I'll create another one right over here. If you don't want to see this camera anymore, you can just click on this icon again, and if you move the camera, it will just disappear. Again, the path tool. I'll just shift this window over here so that we can see better what we're doing, and redraw it again. And last but not least, we have this other one. And there we go. Now we're going to be picking our path tool. So let me start with this one, and I'm going to be increasing the number of our shrubs. We also need to reduce their size a little bit, and we can increase the random size too. To end up with a more realistic look, we need to randomize them. So increase the random direction parameter and the random spacing parameter too. So in this case, we have this huge shrub in here, which we can delete by just clicking on this negative icon. Now we can increase their size, and the same thing over here. So delete this huge one, increase their size, and also start randomizing their direction and their spacing. Also, the random size, it's super important to end up with a natural result. Alright, so let's move on to this one. Delete the big one, increase the number of shrubs, and randomize them. And the same thing for these guys over here. Okay, let's jump into scene 2. Alright, we're getting there. But this looks a little bit too green, so we can add some extra color again on our shrubs. So I'll just pick them, and the way that we can add more 3D models to this path is by clicking on this positive icon. Now we can go all the way down here and see what other colors we have. Okay, so we can use this Syringa vulgaris and the Rosa rugosa. There we go. So the size is a bit too much. Let's lower it. Alright, great. And add a few more. And now we're going to be adding the same one for all of the rest. We need to, again, reduce their size because they're a little bit too big, and increase their number. So because we are reducing their size, we need to increase their number. So let's jump back into this one, and again, the same thing. So variation, it's again super important to end up with a more realistic result. Also, make sure that you are being careful with the scale. I wasn't a second ago, but I'm fixing it right now. Alright, now make sure that you are saving your progress. Okay, so another thing that I want to avoid is to have our trees floating, as you can see, and maybe I can move this one a little bit to the side. Maybe it's a bit too close to the camera. Okay, so we can fix it a little bit. There we go. So we can actually multiply some of the paths that we created to hide the background a bit better. So we can pick these guys and duplicate them to the back, and then just rotate them a little bit and bring them down. At this point, it would be a good idea to edit the camera to see what we're doing on our camera. So I'm going to select this path and lower the trees a little bit. Awesome. So the same thing over to this side. So we can pick these ones now, duplicate them with Shift. Okay, now I can go ahead and place some more trees over on this side, and we can actually have some decorative trees. So I'll go back into assets, and then I can select something from the flowering tree. Okay, we can have this one. It looks pretty interesting. Let's see how it looks on our scene. Okay, pick it, and I'm just going to be placing it right here. Alright, so let's go back to our scene here, and probably not, we can find something else. Okay, so we can try this one and place it over to this side maybe. Being careful not to place it at the front of our architecture. Now if you want to scale a tree, you just need to press the V key, and then you can drag any of these axes, like so. Again, if you want to move it, press the V key again and duplicate it with the Alt key now. Alright, it's not looking bad at all. I'm going to now add another kind of rocks, another kind of stones, because these over here look a bit unnatural. I'm going to go back into assets, now nature and stone. So in stone, I'll pick a darker one. And also if I activate the brush, I can go ahead and press the Alt key to delete these rocks. Just mind that you don't have to have anything on your brush list in order to be able to delete them. Let's go into natural rocks now, and I'm going to be using something like this one, rock 20. So I'll pick it. Okay, so this one is huge. So I'll delete it with the Alt key, and we can place something like this actually all the way over here. Okay, maybe not that big. We can reduce its size a little bit. Alright, something like this is gonna look awesome. Okay, so we can place one over here too. Maybe not that big. So again, reduce its size a little bit. There we go. And the same thing over to this side. What happens if I decide to place one over here? I'm just trying to see if I can add some extra detail to our foreground. Okay, we can delete this one maybe. Okay, let's see how this looks on our scene. Now this one looks a bit too invasive, so we can probably just delete it right now. Yeah, I'm going to try and place it over here instead. Okay, let's see how it looks now. Okay, actually this looks pretty nice. Okay, maybe I can move the camera a bit upwards and I can update the scene right here. And finally, for our 3D models, we can add a character. So maybe a kid playing around here and a couple walking towards the architecture. So for this inside model, we can jump into character. I'm going to go ahead and pick the couple 27 and place them on the walkway. Okay, obviously I don't want them looking in this direction. I want them looking at the architecture. So something around that area. Maybe a little bit closer to the camera. Something like this, maybe. But I feel that we have too many things in this side. So I'll probably just take them again over to this side. Alright, now we can go into effect. And I feel that the scene, it's a bit greenish, so I'm going to go all the way down here into white balance, and I can change this to maybe around 7600 on the temperature, or maybe that's a bit too much. Let's go to 7500. Okay, maybe I didn't nail that correctly. Let's go back and leave it at, yeah, we can leave it at 7500 and reduce the saturation a little bit. If I go down here, we'll find that value. It's currently at 0.05. We can leave it at negative 0.05. We can also increase the vignette. So it's currently at 0.36. Let's see, 0.4 maybe. Let's just update our scene just in case we missed something. And I feel that this foreground trunk, it's a bit too bright. So let's edit the camera here and grab one of our trees so that we can place some shadows on there. So I'm going to be grabbing this one and duplicating it, and then obviously lower it and probably take it out, of course. And let's see. Let's see what happens. Let's see how this looks on scene 2. Maybe it's a bit too dark now. It's looking quite good, but I feel that we have darkened it a little bit too much. So inside exposure, we can go ahead and type in 0.04, for example. Okay, 0.035. And I think that's the sweet spot. And we are ready to render the scene. So I'll jump into image. And I think it will look a little bit better at 4:3 maybe. The preset size, it is going to be 4K, and inside the channels, make sure that the AI pose channel is turned on. Now just click on render, and once it's done, it's important for us to go into the AI post processing options. Now we can double click on scene 2 and then click on AI enhancer, but as you can see, it already looks really good. However, let's enhance it. I'll take the enhancement weight all the way to 1 and click on AI enhancer. And that's the full workflow, from a blank canvas to a finished AI-enhanced render. If you found this helpful, feel free to like and subscribe. I have more full workflow videos coming soon. And again, if you want the assets for this project, including the blueprints, Rhino model, and D5 scene, they're all available on my Patreon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.